Hell Let Loose Vietnam has been released to mixed reviews. The game does some things really well and some things that make me scratch my head.
See it, pimp!
I'm not going to approach this video as if it's the 1980s and I'm trying to sell you shares at Apple with the promise that one day it'll all pay off, even though I believe there is a lot of potential for it to be a good successor to base Hell Let Loose. Despite this full release game presenting itself as a, and let's not beat around the bush, early access release, because we do need to mention the elephant in the room of the launch state, and that is the bugs and issues that I hoped would have been fixed by the time it was released. VoIP is genuinely irritating because there was still a toggle, and the funny thing is, you older people, over 30, are serial hot mic offenders. I understand you work your guts out, probably slaving away at the job site. You come home, want to crack open a tinny and somehow de-stress by playing Hell Let Loose. But I've had to mute a couple of you because you breathe harder than the character whilst they're running, but the robot voice still persisted. If you're playing the game on a console, yeah, it looks less than ideal. Speaking of graphics, if you have an AMD GPU, you don't get FSR, but there is apparently a fix for it. Probably the most annoying bug was how this guy is miraculously always there when you die, but never revives you. I personally experienced bugs, crashes, and the occasional annoying thing, but these are all issues that can be fixed with time. But you might be thinking of spending your money on it now, so you deserve to see these things at the current state. But thankfully, the devs are aware of a lot of them and they have been slowly rolling out fixes within the last couple of days, and hopefully at the moment of uploading this video, a lot of the things that I just mentioned is considered outdated information. But look, based on the reviews and the sentiment everywhere, it's easy to point and laugh at the flaws, which is why I want to talk about what this game does well. When the game actually works, it has those moments on PC where the jungle looks genuinely beautiful. It's thick, dense, the lighting can be a bit of a hit or miss, but when it works, it can look really good. Some people say the jungle gets repetitive, which I disagree with. I find that it offers a unique challenge and gameplay shift from the original Hell Let Loose, where sound plays a much bigger part, where you need to stop, listen, and ambush and be certain you land those hits on the enemy if you're blind firing into the bushes. The game retains almost everything from the previous Hell Let Loose, but that also means if you by some miracle found a group of people using their mics, the gameplay is genuinely fun. I've always been the biggest shill for using a mic in Hell Let Loose, and there's a major reason for it. It's 40%, there's technically two major reasons, but it's 40% because it's a team-based game, but it's 60% because I genuinely believe you will have a better time if you do the bare basics of communicating with your squad to, I don't know, form a strategy or point out where you think the enemy might be coming from, and a team that does that will perform much better than a team that is entirely silent. It's sort of like that old police saying where, you know, you can outrun the car but you can't outrun the radio, sort of highlighting the importance of communication. But the experience when you are communicating is just much better than running around like a headless chicken getting shot from a bush 2 kilometers away, even though that will happen regardless. But the coordination aspect is just as rewarding as it was in base Hell Let Loose, and you do actually have a couple of funny moments with the new dragging mechanic, which I take back what I said in my previous video about it being useless. It's actually a very useful feature where you can drag your teammates closer to medics and you can communicate with them to not give up because we're next to a medic. I admit I was wrong for saying that it served no purpose.
You can't even revive him. Stop dragging him.
But the maps themselves offer a variety of environments from the outskirts of Hue, which I think may have been nuked because it has that Fallout 3 green tint to it, but unfortunately if you do have the rig for it, the game looks really good at times, and each of the maps have their own thing going on, which is why I wasn't really a fan of this map. It was just too bright. It did have the benefit of teaching me that Vietnam does in fact have a desert, because when I spawned it with the AK, I thought I was like liberating Kuwait, not Vietnam. But the commander call-ins and occasional Hell Let Loose is depicted really well, especially graphically, as napalm raining down does give the same fear as a bombing run in base Held Let Loose, coupled with the unique suppression mechanic. The helicopters are a nice addition, and the boats, to an extent, of course. The flying mechanics are wonderful. I actually felt confident hopping in them because all those hours of RS2 translated practically 1-to-1, and when coupled with the communication, you can coordinate with the door gunner to be effective at suppressing a point. Of course, I hope they introduce proper attack helicopters. Not really hope, they do have to implement those, because I understand they do want to they claim asymmetry, but it's not very asymmetrical, and you could say that giving the Americans attack helicopters throws it greatly in their favor, but I don't care. The Cobra needs to be in the game. The PT boats are genuinely great, especially for the Americans, and when people turn the bloody engine off and let it act as a spawn point. You can, if you're playing on some of the newer game modes, which some of them are a bit of a hit or miss, but some of them aren't too bad, where you can drive a boat deep into enemy territory and then you can have your squad spawn off it and attack a point. It did work really well, but these are sort of the things that really stuck out to me as a positive. Transitioning from RS2 or Held Let Loose, you'll find yourself in familiar territory based on what is presented from a foundational level of the gameplay loop. Unfortunately though, having pointed out these things that really make this game fun and enjoyable, I want to turn our attention to some things that really made me scratch my head, and the first is those Sky Dragons. Playing as the VC is honestly so much fun, slinging rockets at them and then pretending like I'm Sevlar, but the helicopters don't take a whole lot of damage, or really any damage, from small arms fire. You can't even take out the pilot unless it hits the glass at a certain area, and it just made me not bother really to shoot at the helicopters, because it just told the pilot, okay, maybe don't land here and keep flying. The helicopters, depending on where you hit, sometimes need 2 rockets to destroy, which is a dumb decision. I understand why they probably did it for game balance, to keep up with the VC tunnels, but you know, if you sink a rocket into a heli, they just fly back to spawn with very little consequence. Another decision that really has me scratching my head is I don't like the fact that people can only spawn on the heli only if it's landed. It should be a persistent thing when the helis are in the air. It should act as a heli from Rising Storm 2 Vietnam, where it's a persistent spawn point. I found that no one will spawn on it other than at the start of the round, because why would I spawn at the HQ, get in the heli, pray that this guy actually knows how to fly, which in RS2 you could tell based on the level, and if they had a familiar name, but you know, hope that this guy manages to land us in a good spot and we don't get shot out of the sky, when you can just spawn at an OP or garrison that is closer to the action. I feel like it does need to be tweaked to give players more of an incentive to spawn on the helicopters, and that it doesn't keep the pilots waiting in spawn hoping for someone to get in, and usually when someone does get in, they won't get out, they just want to sit on the door gunner. Leading off from this, having a co-pilot, personally I don't find as good game design. To elaborate, if you don't know, heli squads consist of 2 people, one that does the fun stuff of actually flying the heli, and the other just waits to either drop a flare or drop supplies. Imagine flying in squad and the co-pilot's only job is to unload the heli supplies at a radio. I suppose it gets people in the squad to communicate and have the co-pilot hop out and build garrisons, but I mean, I never saw it. In my experience of playing the game, I never saw that happen, and the heli is best used solo to drop supplies really quickly and hope a squad leader uses them to build garrisons, or some engineer wanders along and builds nodes. Tanking though is incredibly fun because they are significantly stronger than their World War II counterparts. Using the medium Sherman is genuinely scary because you are vulnerable from all angles, but in Held Let Loose Vietnam you can only do meaningful damage from the rear. Yet again, it takes about 4 rockets at the weakest point and about 6 to 8 if you hit the turret. But yet again, I've found that it can ricochet very easily. But even if you do manage to coordinate a group of anti-tank people, or you know, you sit next to a resupply point, the tank is already long gone by the time you've sunk a second rocket into it. The only real threat to tanks is mines, satchels, and opposing tanks, but yet again that can be very awkward as you just sit in front of each other. Just whoever gets like the first shot off and reloads quicker usually tends to win. But I feel like rockets should be a little more threatening to the survivability of tanks. I joked earlier in the video about how the game is in early access, and I was sort of being half serious when I said that, because the amount of content that this game got released with is very bare bones. Yes, the maps and new toys are genuinely good, but while the factions aren't very asymmetrical, they're definitely, I honestly find that there is a bias towards the north. The US only get the M16, and I think it's just inferior to the Type 56, which, crazy enough, despite firing a bigger bullet, it feels much more accurate at range when you're burst firing. The front sight, I believe that's what it's called, is static, and it just looks awkward when you actually focus on it. They even teased the M14 in the release trailer, but it's not there. The North just has better content, because at least if I get bored with the Type 56, I can switch to a K50M or Mosin Nagant, which does have better use cases depending on the objective. The game really needs to see an influx of new weapons for the US, like the Grease Gun, the M14. The list can honestly go on, and I understand the devs have said there's going to be like a historical basis. They want to focus on like this period of the war and then slowly reintroduce them as time goes on, and then it's like, oh, but the US Army didn't use this, the Marines did, but you're not playing as the Marines, you're playing as you. Like, now, earlier I mentioned it does things great when compared to base Hell Let Loose. That's kind of why I hesitated a bit when I said it, because honestly, I think it's a good Hell Let Loose game, but is it a good Vietnam War game? And in its current state, at the point of release, no, it's not. Plain and simple, I'd be blunt, it's not a good Vietnam War game. You could just replace the weapons and uniforms and it'll be indistinguishable from the Pacific Front. And there isn't a whole lot, you know, when you're playing that really cements the fact that you are in the Vietnam theater. And I feel like it's because the game struggles to express a proper form of asymmetry. There is this hoopla about not incorporating traps into the game. Some people say that the NLF used the traps, the NVA didn't use the traps, so it's not historic. Look, other than another thing is that others are saying something, and I can't verify this, but it's a common thing you'll see people brought up, is that the devs are taking a moral stand about incorporating traps. I haven't been able to find a proper source, but as I mentioned, a lot of people are mentioning it, and honestly, if this is true, I'd have more respect for them if they just said they just don't feel like implementing traps, like they're too lazy, they don't have the technical know-how, because you can't claim a moral high ground whilst having napalm in the game. I don't know, but look, I don't want to sort of stay too much on the topic of RS2 versus Hell Let Loose Vietnam, because I want to let Hell Let Loose Vietnam cook a little more before we start making comparisons. But I will say that what RS2 really excelled at over what we get in Hell Let Loose Vietnam is the overwhelming superior firepower that the US demonstrated in the Vietnam War, from napalm, spooky, really heavy artillery barrages, better weaponry, because all the North get in RS2 is just an artillery strike. Some is just a random scrounge of munitions that was cobbled together to do a random barrage. Some is more of a proper 75mm barrage, I believe, or 105mm barrage. And, you know, it really does show in the game the disparity between the two factions. And in Hell Let Loose Vietnam, the factions do just feel too similar. There's nothing differentiating them, but that's something we'll just have to wait for the game to develop and expand on a little more before we start making really in-depth comparisons. But this all leads back to what I initially said, and that is, this game is an investment. I believe over the next year or two, the stock price of this game will go up a significant amount, but like all stocks, it is a gamble. I have shown you what you get if you buy into it now. That's not to say I don't have fun. I understand that, look, I did come down a little hard on this game, but the core gameplay, when it works, and the visuals, when it works, genuinely a fun game, genuinely worth the money for me. However, there is so much that is lacking, and as I mentioned, you just gotta wait for the stock price to go up, unfortunately. And lying about the game and saying that, oh yeah, it's perfectly fine, just give it, you know, the 50 or however money it's worth in your currency, because trust me, bro, like, it'll get better. But if you want to see what a good Vietnam War game looks like, watch the video that is on screen for a comparison. And if you liked what I had to say, leave a like on the video and subscribe. If you don't like what I had to say, leave a dislike and abuse me in the comments. I'm fair game. I'm willing and happy to have a debate about it. But my name is Tantu, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.